What if I told you that the person you think you are isn't really you at all? That every morning when you look in the mirror, you're staring at a stranger, a carefully constructed performance, a mask so perfectly crafted that even you've forgotten what lies beneath it. This isn't some feel-good self-help nonsense. This is the radical truth that one man discovered in the shadows of 19th century Denmark. A truth so dangerous, so unsettling, that it would shake the foundations of philosophy, religion, and human existence itself. His name was Søren Kierkegaard, and he's about to destroy everything you thought you knew about living. Picture Copenhagen in the 1840s. Everyone has their place, their role, their script to follow. The church provides the answers. Society provides the rules. And everyone is pretending to be happy about it. But there's this one guy, walking alone through the cobblestone streets, watching, thinking, and slowly, horrifyingly, realizing that it's all fake. Every smile is forced. Every prayer is empty. Every life is being lived by someone else's design. That man was Søren Kierkegaard, and he was about to commit the ultimate act of rebellion. He was going to tell the truth, not about politics or economics or social reform, about something far more dangerous, about the lie you tell yourself every single day when you wake up and pretend to be someone you're not. Kierkegaard didn't choose this path. It chose him. Born in 1813 into a wealthy merchant family, he should have had it easy. Money, status, a clear path to success. But his father carried a terrible secret, a guilt so deep it poisoned the entire household. The man believed he was cursed, that some unforgivable sin had damned his entire bloodline. Every conversation was heavy with unspoken dread, every moment shadowed by invisible judgment. Most kids would have crumbled under that weight. But young Søren, it made him dig deeper, made him ask the questions that everyone else was too terrified to ask. Why do we suffer? What does it mean to truly live? And most dangerous of all, who are we when nobody's watching? That childhood of psychological darkness became his greatest gift, because it taught him something that his happy, well-adjusted peers would never understand. Life isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be real. When Kierkegaard went to university, everyone expected him to become a priest. He had the credentials, the knowledge, the family connections. He could recite scripture like poetry and debate theology like a master. But then something happened that would change everything. He realized that knowing about God wasn't the same as knowing God. That studying faith wasn't the same as having faith. That performing religion wasn't the same as experiencing the divine. He looked around at his classmates, his professors, the entire Christian establishment, and saw something that made his blood run cold. They were all actors in a play, reciting lines they'd memorized but never truly felt, going through motions that had lost all meaning, living lives of quiet, desperate performance. And Kierkegaard thought, this isn't faith, this is theater. So he made a choice that would define everything that followed. He walked away from easy answers and embraced the most difficult questions of all. Who am I? Why am I here? And what does it actually mean to be alive? But we need to talk about Regine, because this isn't just a story about philosophy and faith. It's about love and sacrifice and the terrible price of being true to yourself. Regine Olsen was everything Kierkegaard had never dared to hope for. Beautiful, intelligent, and she loved him with a purity that both thrilled and terrified him. They got engaged. For one brief, shining moment, Kierkegaard allowed himself to dream of a normal life, a happy marriage, children, the simple pleasures that everyone else took for granted. But then reality crashed in like a tidal wave. Kierkegaard knew something about himself that Regine didn't. He knew that his path would be lonely, that his calling was to be a voice crying in the wilderness, that the work he had to do would demand everything from him, and he couldn't bear the thought of dragging her into that darkness. So he did something that nearly shattered his soul. He broke off the engagement, deliberately, cruelly, making her hate him so she could move on and find the happiness he could never give her. Imagine that choice. Choosing your purpose over your happiness. Walking away from the person you love because you love them too much to destroy their life. This decision haunted Kierkegaard until his dying day, but it also freed him to become who he needed to become, a man willing to sacrifice everything for truth. After losing Regine, Kierkegaard threw himself into writing with an intensity that bordered on madness. But he didn't write under his own name. Instead, he created an entire cast of characters, different pseudonyms for different perspectives. Why the masks? Because Kierkegaard understood something profound about truth. Sometimes, to tell the truth, you have to become someone else. Each pseudonym represented a different stage of human development, a different way of looking at existence, a different approach to the fundamental questions of life. It was like watching a man have a public conversation with himself, wrestling with the deepest mysteries of human existence. And through this strange, brilliant method, he mapped out what he saw as the three paths every human being must choose between. The three ways of being human. According to Kierkegaard, every person goes through three potential stages in life, three ways of existing in the world, and where you end up determines not just how you live, but who you become. The aesthetic stage, the prison of pleasure. This is where most people start, and tragically, where most people stay. In the aesthetic stage, life is all about sensation, pleasure, avoiding pain, keeping yourself entertained and distracted so you never have to face the deeper questions. Sound familiar? The aesthetic person lives for the moment. They jump from experience to experience, always hunting for the next high, the next thrill, the next escape from the crushing weight of existence. Social media, Netflix binges, shopping sprees, casual hookups, anything to avoid the terrifying silence of being alone with yourself. But here's the brutal truth Kierkegaard discovered. It doesn't work. Eventually, the pleasure fades. The distractions lose their power. The entertainments become boring, and you're left staring into an abyss of emptiness that no amount of stimulation can fill. The aesthetic person becomes a slave to their own desires, always needing more. Never satisfied, living a life of quiet desperation disguised as endless fun. The ethical stage, the tyranny of rules. Some people, when they hit that wall of emptiness, make a choice. They decide to live by principles, by duty, by moral codes and social expectations. This is better than the aesthetic stage. At least now you're taking responsibility, thinking about right and wrong, trying to be a good person. The ethical person follows the rules, pays their taxes, goes to church, treats people fairly, lives a respectable, responsible life. But Kierkegaard saw a trap here, too. When you live purely by external rules, you can become rigid, judgmental, self-righteous. You start thinking that following the code makes you superior to those who don't. More dangerous still, you can lose touch with the mystery and wonder of existence. Life becomes a checklist, a series of obligations to fulfill rather than a journey to experience. The ethical person is safe, predictable, admirable, but they're also dead inside. The religious stage, the leap into the unknown, this is the highest stage, but also the most dangerous, because it requires something that goes against everything we've been taught about rational living. It requires a leap of faith, not faith in a particular religion or doctrine, but faith in something beyond logic, beyond proof, beyond the comfortable certainty of rules and systems. Kierkegaard's favorite example was Abraham on Mount Moriah. God tells him to sacrifice his son Isaac. It makes no rational sense. It violates every moral principle. It should be unthinkable. But Abraham prepares to do it anyway. Not because he understands, but because he trusts something deeper than understanding. The religious stage isn't about joining a church or following a creed. It's about making choices that can't be explained or justified to anyone else. It's about trusting your deepest intuition, even when it contradicts everything the world tells you is reasonable. It's about becoming who you truly are, even if that person makes no sense to anyone else. Here's where Kierkegaard gets really radical. He talked about something he called the sickness unto death. But he wasn't talking about physical death. He was talking about spiritual death. Despair. Now, most people think despair is the enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. Pop psychology tells us to think positive, stay optimistic, keep our chin up. But Kierkegaard had a revolutionary idea. He said despair might actually be a gift, because despair is what happens when you finally stop lying to yourself. Think about it. When do you feel most desperate? When you're living someone else's life. When you're pretending to be someone you're not. When you're going through the motions, but your soul is screaming. That despair isn't your enemy. It's your alarm clock. It's your authentic self trying to break through the performance, trying to wake you up to the fact that you're not living. You're just existing. The sickness unto death isn't despair itself. It's refusing to acknowledge the despair. It's numbing it with distractions. It's pretending everything is fine when your soul is dying. Real health, according to Kierkegaard, comes from facing the despair head-on, listening to what it's trying to tell you, and having the courage to change. Kierkegaard had a deep, almost visceral distrust of crowds, not because he hated people, but because he saw what happened when people got together in large groups. They stopped thinking for themselves. They started following leaders without questioning. They found comfort in conformity. They lost their individuality. He wrote, "The crowd is untruth." What he meant was that truth isn't something you can vote on. It's not something you can decide by consensus. It's not something you can outsource to experts or influencers or popular opinion. Truth is personal, individual, something you have to discover for yourself. This doesn't mean you should ignore other people or live in isolation, but it does mean you can't let the crowd do your thinking for you. You have to be willing to stand alone sometimes, to be different, to be misunderstood, to have people think you're crazy, because the alternative is to lose yourself completely in the comfortable anonymity of the herd. Here's where Kierkegaard really challenged the religious establishment of his time. The church taught that faith was communal. that you needed the institution, the priests, the community to have a relationship with God. But Kierkegaard said, no, faith is personal, it's individual, it's between you and the infinite. He wasn't trying to destroy religion. He was trying to save it from becoming a social club. He looked at the Danish church and saw people going through the motions, reciting creeds they didn't really believe, following rituals that had lost all meaning, showing up on Sundays to be seen rather than to encounter the divine. And he said, "This isn't faith, this is performance art." Real faith, he argued, happens in solitude, in silence, in the depths of your own heart, where nobody else can see or judge or interfere. It's not something you can inherit from your parents, or learn from a book, or absorb from a sermon. It's something you have to experience for yourself, something you have to choose again and again, in the face of doubt and uncertainty and fear. Kierkegaard died in 1855, largely unknown and definitely unappreciated. The establishment dismissed him as a troublemaker. The public ignored him as irrelevant. But his ideas didn't die with him. Decades later, other thinkers discovered his work. People like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and Martin Heidegger. They took his insights about individual existence and personal responsibility and built an entire philosophical movement around them. They called it Existentialism. But here's the crucial difference. Most of the later existentialists were atheists. They believed that if there's no God, then you have to create your own meaning from scratch. Kierkegaard never abandoned faith. He just believed that faith had to be chosen, not inherited. Earned, not assumed. Lived, not performed. He believed, that the relationship between the individual and the eternal was the most important relationship of all. But it had to be real, authentic, personal, not mediated by institutions or traditions or social expectations. If Kierkegaard were alive today, what would he think of our digital age? I think he'd be both fascinated and horrified. Fascinated, because we have more individual freedom than any generation in history. We can choose our careers, our relationships, our beliefs, our identities. We can reinvent ourselves at will. But horrified, because so many of us are using that freedom to avoid making real choices. We curate our online personas instead of developing our actual selves. We seek validation from strangers instead of looking inward for truth. We distract ourselves with endless content instead of facing the big questions. We follow influencers instead of following our own path. Kierkegaard would look at social media and see the ultimate aesthetic existence. Endless pleasure-seeking, constant comparison, never-ending distraction from what actually matters. He'd see people performing their lives instead of living them, broadcasting their experiences instead of experiencing them, collecting likes instead of collecting wisdom. But he wouldn't judge us harshly. He'd ask us the same question he asked his own generation. Are you still in there? Underneath all the noise and performance and pretending? Are you still there? Here's Kierkegaard's challenge for us today. Stop performing. Start being. Stop trying to be who you think you should be and start figuring out who you actually are. Stop looking for answers outside yourself and start listening to the voice inside. Stop following the crowd and start walking your own path. This isn't easy. In fact, it's terrifying. Because when you stop pretending, you have to face yourself. All of yourself. The good, the bad, and the ugly parts you've been trying to hide. You have to own your choices. your mistakes, your failures. You have to take responsibility for your life. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop running from yourself, you start running toward yourself. When you stop trying to be perfect, you start becoming real. When you stop living for other people's approval, you start living for the right reasons. Kierkegaard had another radical insight. He said anxiety isn't something to be eliminated. It's something to be embraced. Because anxiety is the feeling of freedom. Think about it. When do you feel most anxious? When you're facing a big decision. When you're about to make a change. When you're stepping into the unknown. That anxiety you feel. That's your soul recognizing that you have choices. That your life isn't predetermined. That you have the power to shape your own destiny. Most people try to avoid anxiety by avoiding choices. They stay in jobs they hate because it's safe. They remain in relationships that aren't working because it's familiar. They keep doing the same things over and over because it's comfortable. But Kierkegaard said, lean into the anxiety. It's telling you something important. It's telling you that you're alive, that you have agency, that you matter. That anxious feeling before you quit your job to start your own business, that's freedom knocking. That nervousness before you have an honest conversation with someone you love, that's authenticity calling. That uncertainty before you make a major life change, that's your true self trying to emerge. In a world that rewards image over substance, Kierkegaard calls us to a revolution of honesty. Be honest about your struggles. Be honest about your doubts. Be honest about your fears. Be honest about your dreams. Stop pretending you have it all figured out. Nobody does. The people who claim they do are usually the most lost of all. Stop pretending you're perfect. Perfection is boring. It's also impossible. What's interesting is the struggle, the journey, the process of becoming. Stop pretending you're someone you're not. The world doesn't need another fake version of perfection. It needs your authentic, messy, complicated truth. Every single day, you wake up and make a choice. You can choose to be authentic, or you can choose to perform. You can choose to face yourself, or you can choose to hide. You can choose to ask the hard questions, or you can choose to settle for easy answers. You can choose to live your truth, or you can choose to live someone else's version of what your life should look like. Kierkegaard believed that this choice is the most important choice you'll ever make, because it's not just about what you do. It's about who you become. And who you become is the gift you give to the world. Every time you choose authenticity over performance, you give others permission to do the same. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you make it easier for someone else to be honest. Every time you choose to be real instead of perfect, you create space for others to be human. So where do you start this journey of authentic living? You start by turning inward, not in a selfish way, but in a sacred way. You start by asking yourself the questions that scare you. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I believe when it's not popular to believe it? What would I do if I weren't afraid of what other people think? What would I choose if I knew I couldn't fail? More importantly, what would I choose if I knew I might fail? These questions don't have easy answers. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to wake you up, to stir something deep inside you, to start you on the journey of becoming who you're meant to be. One of the hardest parts of Kierkegaard's message is this. Sometimes, being authentic means being alone, not lonely. but alone. There's a crucial difference. Loneliness is when you want to be with others, but can't. Aloneness is when you're comfortable with your own company. When you know who you are, you don't need constant validation from others. When you're secure in your own identity, you don't need to follow the crowd to feel safe. When you're connected to your own truth, you don't need to perform for applause. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself. Relationships matter. Community is important, but you should engage with others from a place of strength, not weakness. From authenticity, not desperation. The people who truly matter will love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. For Kierkegaard, faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being comfortable with questions. It wasn't about certainty. It was about trust. It wasn't about proof. It was about experience. This is what he meant by the leap of faith. Not because it's irrational, but because it goes beyond rational, beyond what can be proven or calculated or figured out. It's like falling in love. You can't prove why you love someone. You can't logic your way into it. You can't create a spreadsheet that justifies it. But you know it when you feel it. And once you feel it, it changes everything. Faith, for Kierkegaard, is like that. It's not about blind belief. It's about deep knowing. The kind of knowing that comes from experience, not explanation. So here's my question for you. What is your despair trying to tell you? What is that restless feeling in your soul trying to communicate? Maybe it's telling you to change careers, to stop doing work that doesn't match who you are. Maybe it's telling you to end a relationship that's slowly killing your spirit. Maybe it's telling you to start a relationship you've been avoiding out of fear. Maybe it's telling you to create something, to express the art or music or writing that's been burning inside you. Maybe it's telling you to travel, to see the world and expand your perspective. Maybe it's telling you to stay put and dig deeper where you are. Whatever it's saying, don't ignore it. Don't numb it with alcohol or drugs or shopping or social media. Don't silence it with busyness or productivity or achievement. Don't argue with it or rationalize it away. Listen to it, because that voice isn't your enemy. That's your truest self, trying to break through all the layers of performance and pretense and social conditioning. That's the person you were meant to be, fighting to emerge. Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." You can't wait until you have it all figured out to start living authentically. You can't wait until you're ready. You'll never feel ready. You can't wait until it's convenient. It will never be convenient. You can't wait until you're not scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear. You have to start now, with what you have, where you are, as you are. Because here's the truth that no one wants to admit. You'll never be completely ready. You'll never have perfect clarity. You'll never eliminate all risk. But you can start being real. You can start being honest. You can start being you. And that's enough, more than enough. That's everything. Kierkegaard died young, at 42. He was largely unknown in his lifetime. He never married, never had children, never achieved the conventional markers of success. But he lived authentically. He asked the hard questions. He refused to settle for easy answers. He chose truth over comfort, authenticity over applause, solitude over conformity. And because he made those choices, his voice still speaks to us across the centuries. Your life might not change the world the way Kierkegaard's did, but it might change your world. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Because when you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. When you ask the hard questions, you make it safer for others to question too. When you choose truth over performance, you create ripples that spread far beyond what you can see. So here we are, at the end of our journey, through Kierkegaard's revolutionary ideas. But this isn't really an ending. It's a beginning. Because now you have to decide, what are you going to do with what you've learned? Are you going to go back to sleepwalking through life? Performing your way through each day? Following scripts written by other people? Or are you going to wake up? Are you going to keep pretending to be someone you're not? Or are you going to start the difficult, beautiful work of becoming who you actually are? Are you going to keep following the crowd? Or are you going to find your own path, even if it means walking alone sometimes? The choice is yours. It always has been. But now you know that you have a choice, and that knowledge changes everything. Remember, you are not a passenger in your own life. You are the driver. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are the author of your story. You are not here to live someone else's dreams or meet someone else's expectations. You are here to discover and live your own truth. The question Kierkegaard asked over 150 years ago is still waiting for your answer. Who are you? Not who you pretend to be. Not who others expect you to be. Not who you think you should be. Who are you, really? The world is waiting for your answer. But more importantly, you're waiting for your answer. So stop waiting. Start answering. Start living. Start being. The time is now. You are now. This is your moment. What are you going to do with it?